Hello, and thank you so much for watching my project on True Knots, a story about my daughter Tessa. My name is Daniel Clampett, SBN, which stands for Student Vocational Nurse, and I am with VN55. This is for my obstetrics class. So true knots, like their name, is a true full knot that happens to start in the umbilical cord when it loops and interweaves around itself. They form during pregnancy, especially when the baby is more active and moves around in the amniotic fluid, um, and during birth. By definition, these cords are manually untangled because they are knotted from the outside of the umbilical cord. That I can attest to because we had to do the same to my daughter. Right here is a true knot. You can see it, nice little square knot in the cord. They happen in less than 2% of all pregnancies, and most are really loose. However, if your baby's cord is knotted early, the baby's growth and future movements can tighten the knot off and squeezing, restricting blood flow and oxygen to the baby. True knots get more dangerous as the baby gets closer to birth. In a worst case scenario, the baby can get asphyxia and can lead to death. Tight knots increase the mortality rate of babies by 10%. Most obstetricians are often concerned and perplexed about the exact time that they form. In general, the belief is it happens between 9 to 12 weeks of gestation. This early gestation is because there's a lot more amniotic fluid and the baby has a lot more room to move. Paradoxically, there are reports and evidence that show that knots form in the umbilical cord when the woman is undergoing labor. Incidence is between 1 to 2%. It's more common in amniotic twins, more active fetuses, and so on. Right here, this little guy's got a nice little knot. Umbilical knots happen more often in older mothers. For some reason, male babies or really active babies. Smaller babies because they have more room, longer umbilical cords, excessive amniotic fluid, a second or subsequent pregnancy, and multiple babies in utero. Which make a lot of sense if you think about it because it's just more to tangle. So here you see two knots, a loose one and a tight one. There's nothing a mother or a doctor can do to prevent them. Just keeping on an eye on the baby's movement and fetal heart rate is key. Decreased activity also is usually a sign that something's wrong. If there is an early formed true knot, problems will show up around week 37. The baby won't be as active and show signs of distress. A knot can stunt the growth and decrease blood flow and oxygen to the baby. And there has been instances of mental retardation and developmentally delayed with kids with true knots. There's another knot on this baby right here. And this just goes on to talk about like if they see decreased fetal heart tones and they're suspecting there might be a knot, then they're going to want to take the mom to C-section immediately and take the pressure off the cord so that the baby, he or she doesn't lose too much oxygen. Here's another good picture of a knot. This one's loose. Most umbilical knots aren't diagnosed until birth has already happened. Even with the widespread use of ultrasounds, doctors now know that mothers-to-be who have amniocentesis where a small amount of fluid is taken from the sac. They can see any kind of genetic defects, gestational diabetes, and so on. And so they're hoping that by doing these tests, they can somehow figure out how to test for an umbilical knot. Right here, you can see a 4-dimensional color Doppler, and they're thinking that this is going to be the best way to help know if there's a knot in the cord. And by doing this, the ultrasound tech can follow the umbilical cord as best they can and scan as much of it as they can to try to see if there's any knotting happening. Unfortunately, cord knots are not easily diagnosable, and it's going to be on the doctor and the staff to be vigilant and look for specific complications. Here's a list of my references. Number 10 was really good. It was an article about how doctors kind of got themselves in trouble. I'm going to pause right here and just talk for a minute. So this beautiful little girl is my second daughter. Her name is Tessa. On the right-hand picture, she's the tall one in the middle. And she was a completely normal and healthy pregnancy. We had no issues with her. The only interesting things about her pregnancy was that at about a week prior to her delivery date, because I believe her delivery date was like August 14th. So like on, I think it was August 3rd, she had an appointment. Just my wife had her normal checkup, and the doctor asked my wife if she wanted her membrane stripped, and I had taken some time off duty to go with her to her appointment. And so she did, and it was painful, obviously, but my wife handled it like a champ, and we had lunch, and then I went back to being on the fire truck. Actually, I was on the ambulance, I'm sorry, back on the ambulance that day, and my wife headed home, and our doctor's office was in Gilroy, but we lived over in the Central Valley, and so she started over the pass and stopped at Casa Fruta because she was having some cramping. And so she walked around for a little bit, and the cramping became more regular. And she got in her car to start driving again. And then she called me and she said, this doesn't feel like a Braxton Hicks. This feels more. And so, well, why don't you call the doctor's office? So she called the doctor's office, and they said, well, why don't you come in? And she came in, and they immediately sent her to the ER, or to the hospital, because she was in labor. And my wife labored through the evening and into the early morning. I think about 8 or 9 hours. She'll correct me after I finalize this video. And we had our little Tessa girl. And so her delivery was pretty quick. And when she came out, she looked good. Being a paramedic, I gave her a quick glance and knew my APGAR, and she was in good shape. She didn't need any oxygen or anything. But I heard the doctor say, "Oh, that's interesting." Never anything that I ever want to hear as a new parent. And I turned to look, and there was a knot in her cord. It wasn't tight. It was loose, but it was there. And it was kind of wrapped around her neck, but it wasn't fully around her neck. And so we talked with the doctor afterwards, and she explained to us, kind of the reasons why it happens, and they still don't really know for sure when or how. And to monitor, because sometimes, if they are tight, that they can cause a lack of oxygen and stunting of growth. But she hasn't stunted her growth. She's always been bigger than my oldest daughter, and she's about 5'7" now. She's a pretty tall girl. She grew up without any kind of deficits and completely healthy. But after we had her, my wife was deemed high risk at that point because they assumed that our next pregnancy, which was our son, would have it. I appreciate the fact that you're listening to this, and I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed the research and providing you some pictures of not only my daughter, but of some other little babies. Have a good day.